we're all good to go. So, welcome everybody to our PA Club first Zoom meeting or webinar. I'm really delighted that we could still go ahead with this event and that so many of you are able to join us. So lots of faces and names there that we know from previous events and a few new ones. So welcome to you all. So what the order of today is that we have a presentation from Ian Golding, who I will hand over to in a minute. And Ian will give you all the chance to ask questions, and then we're going to do a little bit of networking, and a couple of you I know have experienced this before. Jilly has done them before. Hi Jilly. We'll explain to you how that works when we get to it. So just to advise you that we are recording the webinar, so if you don't want to be on view, please turn your camera off. If you've got any questions for Ian, you can either pop them on the chat function or you can save them and ask them yourself when he finishes his presentation. We will send over a copy of the slides afterwards with Ian's permission as a PDF. Yeah, yes, he's nodding.
Yep,
yeah,
no problem at all.
Lovely, thank you, Ian. So I think that's everything from me for the moment. So I'm going to hand you over to our speaker, Ian Golding of Glow Training. Ian has a fantastic title of Unlock Your Glow, which is essentially, he's going to talk to us about how to improve our confidence with lots of hints and tips and tweaks we can do to our behaviour. I think that's, hope that's the right way.
That's about right. Yeah, that's about right.
Great. Okay. Right. So I'm going to hand over to Ian and listen to his presentation. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Alison. Hello, ladies. How are you doing? I am. Oh, nice ways there. Thank you. I am Ian Golding from Glow. Could I ask, if you haven't already done so, could you mute yourself? There will be some time for Q&A at the end. And could you put your Zoom on speaker view? Which, if you don't know how that works, is in the top right hand corner. There's gallery view where you can see everyone, and speaker view where you should just be seeing me while I'm talking. That's probably the best way of doing this. So yes, I'm Ian Golding, and I think I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what on earth is going on with that moustache? I'm sorry, all I can say is it was a moment of lockdown madness, and it will definitely be coming off before the world goes back to normal and I have to meet people face to face. Equally, apologies for the massive lockdown hair. Can't wait for the barbers and hairdressers to open up again. I'm from Glow. We're a training company. We're based in Hatfield in Hertfordshire, and I've been a member of the Hertfordshire Chamber for over 3 years now. And before lockdown, what Glow did, we're experts in helping people with confidence, with their impact, and with charisma. And so before lockdown, we were working with companies all around the UK, increasingly around Europe and a little bit in the US, companies of all industries, of all sizes, and working with people at all levels of those organizations to help them become more aware and more in control of their own behavior and how they were, the messages that they were sending when they were communicating with people in the meetings that they had with colleagues and clients, in the way that they communicated as teams, and the way that they may be presented or talked as leaders. We were helping people to realize that they could, by taking small but deliberate changes to their behavior, they could look and feel much more confident, much more competent, much more in control, but also more convincing, more charismatic, more successful, and more believable. What this session is about is I'm going to show you some tips and hopefully some interesting, simple changes that you can make to your own behavior to come across as the best version of you in all sorts of situations. We're probably going to be focusing on how it works in this situation, in a Zoom or online meeting situation, which for most of us is the kind of business interaction that we're having at the moment. But everything I'm going to tell you about also has relevance and application to face-to-face meetings when we get back into that sort of situation. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to share my screen and talk you through some slides that will help us talk about this issue. Fantastic. So, yeah, as Alison said, this session is about unlocking your glow. What does that mean? Well, by that I mean how you can feel more confident and more in control, and be sure that you're coming across at your best, as the best version of you in the work situations that you face. And as I said, specifically in these sorts of Zoom or online meetings that we're all having at the moment. What I haven't told you yet, and what I need to tell you about how Glow works, is at the heart of our training, and why I think our training is different and why it's been so successful over the last 12 years that we've been doing it, is that our training brings skills and techniques from the world of professional performance, and by that I mean theatre, film and TV, brings secret skills from that world into business to help professional people like you become more aware and more in control of their own behaviour, so they can look and feel more confident and more in control in real situations. And to talk about these secret theatre techniques, we need to talk about the ancient power of mask. So actors obviously do lots of different types of acting. There's acting in front of a live audience in theatre, and that's the sort of techniques that we used to deliver before lockdown when we're doing face-to-face training. Actors also come across brilliantly on screen, on TV and film, and I'm going to talk to you about how they do that, because there's a real interesting parallel between how actors do that on TV and film and how you might be able to do a little bit more of that over Zoom. And what I mean by that is actors come across brilliantly just when they need it. They come across convincingly, even though they're not being themselves, they're playing a role. They come across in a way that holds our attention and gets their message across really powerfully and memorably and convincingly. And they cope with pressure and nerves of situations that for most of us would be a bit unbearable. Sort of stepping out on stage in front of 1,000 or 2,000 people would cause most of us to really have a wobble, but actors deal with it. How do they do it? Well, it's through techniques and behaviour, and that's what I'm going to tell you about. We're obviously not talking about stepping on stage, but for a lot of us, going on a Zoom can be pressured as well. Maybe you don't like the technology, maybe you're not comfortable, or you haven't done enough of these sorts of things to feel really comfortable and in control of it. You're not sure about how you're coming across, or you might be talking to people who for whatever reason put you under pressure. Senior people within your own organisation, or clients who are important or not very nice. All of these things can put pressure on us, so we don't come across in the best way, in the way that we would want to, and that's what this session's all about. So the ancient power of mask. I don't know if you're familiar with this image, this sort of happy and sad mask, comedy and tragedy mask. They're the traditional representation or traditional image of theatre. You often see them in theatres on the arch, on the proscenium arch above the stage. They're the masks of comedy and of tragedy. And they're there because on stage, all of life can be represented. Actors represent every personality type, every aspect of life, from the funniest comedy to the most tear-jerking tragedy and everything in between. But they're masks because theatre grew out of people standing up in front of a group of other people wearing masks. And so in every culture across the globe, way back in prehistory, thousands of years ago, theatre started with people wearing masks and pretending to be someone else to tell a story to a group of people. In ancient Greece, in ancient Rome, in ancient China, ancient Africa, ancient America, people wore masks to do what, to act in theatre. Now, why do they wear masks? Well, masks do two interesting things. They have two powers. One is they protect the actor from the stress of standing out in front of a room full of people, 1,000 people, 2,000 people. They protect you and allow you to be free to do the acting. Or more modernly in film, they protect you from the weird situation where you're bearing your soul and trying to act naturally, but you've got a room full of people looking at you, camera people, sound people, script people, all staring at you. So a mask protects you, but it also sends a very clear message about the character that you're playing. It shows the audience who you are in that moment. So that's what masks do. They protect the actor, but they also send a very clear message to the audience. Modern theatre actors obviously don't wear masks anymore, and they certainly don't in the films that we watch on TV and the cinema, or do they? So actors still wear a mask, but they wear a mask that's made of behaviour. What actors training allows them to do is harness their behaviour to build a behavioural mask, because the power of mask is still vital to them. They still have to be protected from the weird situation that they're in, from the pressure of the situation, and they still need to send a really clear, strong message to their audience about who they're being, who they're pretending to be. So here in this slide, there's a couple of examples of really well-known actors playing really well-known people, and each of those actors has approached that role by saying, breaking down the behaviour that they need to change to be convincing in that role. How does this character stand? How do they walk? Fast, slow? What sort of energy do they have? How do they gesture? Big, small? Do they gesture at all? Are they very still people? Are they frenetic people? Lots of energy? How do they talk? Loud, soft, quiet? What sort of accent? What sort of eye contact they give? Every aspect of the behaviour of that character is considered and built into a behavioural mask to protect the actor and to be convincing as they're portraying the actor on screen. So, why am I talking about this? What on earth has this got to do with us and unlocking our glow and being the best version of us in Zoom meetings? Well, I think there's a parallel. I think this notion of being a little bit more aware of the mask that you're presenting when you're on a Zoom meeting can be hugely beneficial. And the mask can do two things for you as well. It can protect you and make you feel more confident, more comfortable, and more in control in the situation. And it can also much more powerfully present to the people you're talking to the best version of you, the version that you'd love them to see, the confident version of you, the authoritative version of you, the version of you that knows what she's talking about and needs to be listened to. And that's what I want to show you. So how can we build a confident or more confident Zoom mask? Well, what you need to do is you need to dial up your behavior. You need to work harder at your behavior like an actor would, because that's all actors are doing. They work much harder at their behavior than most of us would consider doing. So here's something that's at the heart of our training at Glow. It's called the dial of behavior. And I have to apologize to the scientifically minded amongst you. It's not exact science. What it is it's meant to be an illustration of you starting to think about taking more control over behavior, which most of us, for the most part, kind of take for granted. We kind of assume that our behavior is taking care of itself. If we kind of feel okay, we kind of assume we're coming across okay, aren't we? Well, my experience, both 11 years as an actor on stage and now 12 years as a trainer going into businesses, is that's not necessarily the case. And if we're trying to remember what to say and the thing that we want to get across, or if we're under any sort of pressure or feeling in any way uncomfortable, it's very likely that we're not coming across in the way that we want. And what you need to do is you need to be more mindful, more conscious, and more deliberate about your behavior. You need to dial up your behavior and work harder at it in order to ensure that you're coming across in the way that you want and that you're feeling the way that you want, more confident and more in control. Let me talk you through this dial. So it's a very simple scale of 1 to 10 around a dial. The notion being that the scale is how hard I'm working on my behavior, how much concentration I'm putting into my behavior, how much effort I'm putting into my behavior, like eye contact, like the volume at which I speak, like tone of voice, like how I'm standing, like how I'm gesturing. All sorts of really simple behaviors that we take for granted. We're going to think about how hard we're working at them. Where 1 out of 10 is I'm not thinking about them at all. They're taking care of itself, doing their own thing. And 10 out of 10 is I'm working and concentrating as hard as humanly possible and putting loads more effort and being bigger, louder, working harder at that behavior. Now, I would say for the most part, most of us work on the white side of this scale. It's called the everyday energy zone, between 1 and 5 of our potential energy. That's not a criticism. Why? That's perfectly natural and normal. Why would we work any harder than we need to? And for the most part, we can get away with communicating with other people without being really mindful and conscious of our behaviour. If I'm at home with family, I don't have to think about my tone of voice or eye contact when I talk about breakfast. I just talk, they hear what I'm saying, and things get done. If I don't talk very loudly, they know I don't talk very loudly, and they don't mind doing a bit more work, listening a bit harder. Even at work, if you're with people that know you well and people that like you, they kind of compensate for your behaviours. If you don't make a lot of eye contact, they kind of work around it and go, oh, well, that's just Ian. That's just what he's like. If you don't talk very loudly, they go, oh, that's just Ian, and they'll listen a bit harder. But once we go outside of comfort zone of people that like and know you to other audiences, they are much less likely to do the work to compensate. And so if you don't speak very loudly, it might be a problem. If you don't think about your body language, if you're closed in your body language, if you fiddle, if you fidget, that might be a problem. And let me talk a little bit more and let's see what I mean. Now, on the scale, as I said, most of us for the most part are in the white zone, the everyday zone. Actors on stage, which is the background that I come from, they're in a very different place. They're all the way around on that zone on a 9 or a 10. Now, they're there because the audience that they talk to are very unforgiving. They've paid a lot of money to come and see them. They expect to be entertained. And if I don't work hard to hold their attention, they'll get bored. They'll talk amongst themselves. They'll get their phones out. No one will come back from the interval. They'll stay in the bar and I will be fired. So an actor on stage has to work hugely hard at their voice, tone of voice, energy, gesture. Everything is much bigger than it would be in everyday life. But rest assured, ladies, I'm not suggesting that that's what you should be doing on your Zoom. It's a red zone for a reason. I'm not suggesting we all now go, hello, I've had 20 minutes with Ian, and now this is, no. That's not what it is. It's just an indication of how different people are using behaviour. When we were working face-to-face with people and working with people on presentations, we often said you need to dial up not to the red zone, but maybe to a 7 or an 8, depending on the size of the audience that you're talking to. But in this dynamic, when we're talking about Zooming, I think dialing up from the everyday to that orange zone, online or Zoom impactful energy, moving from a 3, 4 or a 5 out of 10 to a 5.5, 6, 6.5, 7 is a thing that's worth considering. What I'm talking about is I want you to think about pushing your voice, and we'll talk about the behaviors in a second, pushing your voice a bit louder and a bit stronger than you would normally consider doing. Thinking a bit more about whether you're making eye contact or whether you're looking away in the interaction that you're having. I want us to make small but deliberate changes to behaviour because it can make a world of difference to how I'm viewed and judged by my audience, how I come across, but also how I feel. Not a massive change, not a ridiculous change up to the red zone. The things we're talking about may feel weird to start off with, but I guarantee that from the other side, that's not what you would, excuse me, that was me. From the outside, that's not how you will come across. So I want to talk about some really simple behaviors to dial up. Here I want to talk about sitting up, speaking up, looking up, and smiling. So on one level, not rocket science. I'm sure that a lot of you are sitting there going, yeah, and I am doing those things anyway. But the question is, are you? The question is, I've been doing this for 12 years, and in 12 years, time and again, I work with people who, of course, intellectually understand that posture is important, that the volume and tone of voice that you speak with and communicate with is important. Of course it is. That eye contact is important. We all know that. But in a real situation, there's a lot of dynamics at play. And if I'm in a meeting and I'm trying to remember what I want to say, I'm trying to remember content and get my point across or get someone to agree to something, or if there's any sort of pressure, if I'm not enjoying the dynamic, if I've already been on 3 Zooms today and I'm exhausted, if I'm talking to someone who's not very nice, who gives me pushback or puts me under pressure for whatever reason, then it's really likely that however much intellectually I know how I should be behaving, my behavior is actually doing something else. The messages that I'm sending are not me at my best or my best version of me. is a version of me that actually, if I was looking objectively, is not how I would want to come across, is less confident that I want to come across, is less knowledgeable that I want to come across. And small but deliberate changes to these behaviour can make a massive difference. For most of us, there's one or two that we really need to focus on a little bit more to really take this over the line. So what I'm going to do now, if it's okay with you, is I'm going to stop sharing because I want to just talk to you just as me, but we may come back to this just to conclude at the end. So I want to talk to you first about sitting up. So sitting up, not, again, all of this, not rocket science, all of this is things that you know, but I'm talking about small changes that can be a world of difference. How you present yourself in the screen of Zoom can be massively important. I don't know about you, but I am having to sit through loads of Zooms where people are just off to the slide or for some reason can't center themselves. I talk to my parents because I don't see them every other day, and for some reason my mum and dad can only ever do Zooms like this. They have no concept of the fact that just because they can see me, I can't see them. And I think that it's really important to consider. Now, of course, you will know it, and you all came on this Zoom, a lot of people were sitting nice and squarely in the middle. But what happens is as the meeting goes on, or like I say, if it's the second or third meeting that you've had, people start to drop in their seats. Of course they do, it's totally understandable. But you need to, both for how you're coming across and for how you're feeling in the situation, you need to be thinking about sitting up. The ideal is to sit yourself and present yourself in the center of your screen, a bit like a newsreader. If you imagine a newsreader is framed on the BBC News, on the ITV News, so that they're pretty much, their nose is in the center of the frame. There's some space above their head, but not too much. And the majority of their body and their face is right in the center. Now that's useful because we read it as an audience as a bit like a newsreader. And newsreaders come with connotations of confidence, of gravitas, of authority, and of knowing what they're talking about. And to have some of that in how you're projecting yourself in your Zoom is really useful. The other thing is, if I sit up, I feel more energized. I feel more engaged. I can make myself click into my meeting by a simple shift of how I'm sitting. And I think that's a really useful thing for you to have a think about. So sitting up, I want you to think about dialing up your performance, being a bit more conscious, a bit more aware, a bit more deliberate about what you're doing with your posture and with your sitting. The second one is speaking up. And for me, it's the most important. It's the most important for this medium, for Zoom, but it's definitely also the most important for face-to-face meetings and situations when we get back there. Over the last 12 years, time and again, I've worked day in, day out with people, often with women who say to me, Ian, I've got a problem at work. People just don't listen to me. They don't take my input seriously. I sit in meetings and people talk over me, or I sit in meetings and I say something, people go, yeah, yeah, yeah. Then someone else says exactly the same thing and everyone applauds and says that was fantastic. But no one remembers that I said it first. What is going on? And I say to them, you don't speak loudly enough. You don't realize it, but you don't speak loudly enough. Almost all of us speak more quietly than we think that we do, because we hear our voice through the internal tubes that we speak through. So your voice is much louder to you than it is to the rest of the world. And you've set an appropriate level for you to talk at based on all sorts of factors and history as you grew up, and from your family background, how loud your family was, how loud your parents spoke, what was appropriate within your family setting. All these sorts of things inform how loudly we speak. And now you just assume you speak at a perfect volume, but probably you don't. And if you find that people don't listen to your input or don't take you as seriously as you want, it could really likely be that your voice is quieter than you think it is. If you're not speaking very loudly, you are asking your audience to do the work to make the message that you're trying to communicate land with them. And like I said, family and people that like you and people that are friendly to you might do that work, but other people won't. And there's a certain personality type that most of us have to deal with at some point in our working career that definitely won't. That says, if he or she's not speaking loudly, they're probably not confident. They probably don't know what they're talking about. So why should I listen? I'm just going to do what I'm going to do, or I'm going to give my opinion because I definitely know what I think and I'm more confident than them. And that's where people start talking over you. If I if I start dropping back, so I'm going to dial my own voice back to a more everyday setting. I'm now speaking at a volume, I'm not whispering, but I'm speaking at a volume that's much more how I would be speaking if there was someone sitting beside me in the room. But it's probably much harder for you to hear me because I don't know how good my microphone is on my machine. I don't know how good your speakers are on your machine. There's loads of mediated levels in this new Zoom world getting in the way of my voice getting across, let alone me not speaking loudly enough. So I have to take responsibility to put the energy in at my end in the hope that you will hear it at your end. So I want you to consider dialing up how loud you speak on your Zooms. You need to be pushing your voice, not shouting, but you need to be pushing your voice louder than you would normally do. It should feel slightly too loud for you, but I'm sure it won't feel too loud to the people that you're talking to unless you really start shouting, which I'm not suggesting that you do. Think about, visualize for yourself where the speaker is on your laptop, on your tablet, on the device that you're using, and imagine the sound waves that you create when you talk. And what you're doing is you're pushing them towards that microphone and making sure they impact and hit that microphone. And you should feel that you need to work a little bit harder, push your voice a little bit louder than you would normally do. That's the setting that you should be on. Just a little bit more than 4 or 5, 5.5, 6, something like that. That's the way to get your point across. So sit up and speak up. Okay, I want to talk about look up. Eye contact, we all know, is important when we're working face-to-face in the real world, but eye contact can be massively important in Zoom as well. How many times have you watched people on Zooms drift off because there's so much interesting stuff behind the screen in the room that they're looking in, let alone if they've already got their phones out and they're reading their other emails while they're on the phone to you. Of course, I never do that, but some people do. So you notice immediately when someone starts to lose concentration on the Zoom. And you also, even if we're not distracted by other things, most of us unwittingly break eye contact if we're trying to form a thought, if we're thinking about how we want to communicate to other people. We find it much easier to put our thoughts together if we're not looking at a sea of faces who are staring at us expectantly, but we're kind of looking around. Now that's good for me because I'm getting my thoughts in order, but it's not necessarily good for you. You don't feel connected to me. So you need to be thinking more about making sure you're looking at the Zoom and the faces that are in front of you as much as you can to make sure that you're signaling that you're part of that Zoom. But if you really want to make a point and you want to make eye contact like you would in the real world to make sure people are listening and they see how much you're insisting on the point that you're making, you need to make eye contact with them. And by that, you need to look at the camera. The webcam on your computer or the camera on your device, you need to stare directly in that. Now that feels very weird to do because I'm staring at an inanimate object. But hopefully for you, you can see the difference from when I'm looking at you or when I'm looking at everyone else who's on the Zoom. And it's a small, but I think potentially really potent difference. I'm not suggesting you should do the whole meeting staring at this invisible, this inanimate object, but when you want to make a point and when you really want to connect with your audience, don't look at their image, look at the camera on your device. So we're sitting up, we're speaking up, we're looking up, and finally we're smiling. Now I know, I'm sure a lot of you are sitting there going, smiling, Ian? I don't need to dial up my behaviour of smiling. I'm a really smiley, positive person. I smile all the time. And my rhetorical question for you is, do you? Again, in the 12 years that I've been working with people, almost everyone smiles less than they think that they do. Because all the time you're feeling positive, you're kind of assuming that your body's smiling. But in actual fact, if you relax your facial muscles, most of us have resting, I'm not going to say that word, resting grump face, shall we say. Our face turns down if we're not concentrating. Mine certainly does. So however positive I might be feeling, if I'm not really thinking about whether I'm smiling, the thing that I'm signaling and projecting is that I'm not happy, I'm not having a good time, I'm not engaged, I'm bored, I don't agree. And even though that's very far from what I want to be projecting or what I'm even thinking inside. So if you want to be projecting positivity, if you want to show people that you're agreeing and connecting with what they're talking about and you want to be a positive force within the Zoom, you need to be more mindful of your smile. You need to dial up the effort to smile. Now, I'm not talking about going to an 8 or a 9 out of 10. I'm not talking about a manic, ridiculous, clowny grimace. I'm talking about just making sure that rather than this, you're doing this. A tiny but shift that can make all the difference with how I connect to you, how I see you, and how much I like you and think you like me, which can be a really important currency within a Zoom. So, again, not rocket science, but I hope useful and interesting, simple things that we can all take control of by dialing up with a little bit more effort our behavior. I want you to think about sitting up because it will make you feel different, more interested, more engaged, maybe even more confident in the interaction that you're having. I want you to think about speaking up because it will make people listen to what you've got to say and make them take your points more seriously. And you shouldn't be relying on them to do the work to get your message across. I want you to look up. I want you to be mindful of when your eye contact is wandering. I want you to be looking at the people who are on your screen. And if you need to, looking in the camera of your device to make eye contact. And I want you to be thinking about smiling, because 90% of us have got that resting grump face. And if you want to make the meeting positive for them and feel more positive yourself about the meeting, a small but deliberate smile can make all the difference. Okay, so that's the end of my short presentation. I hope that's been of interest. If anyone's got any questions, I'd love to see if I can help out.
Thank you, Ian. That was really great, and yeah, lots of points that hit home there, I think. So to try and remember them for future Zooms and meetings, of course, face-to-face meetings as well. Has anyone got a question for Ian? Yeah, Ginny, over to you.
Ian, hello, Ginny Cooper Stanter.
Hi, Ginny.
Hello. Do you have any suggestions on what to do when you're in a meeting and there's a slight delay on Zoom and you want to get your point across and you start speaking and someone else is speaking and then you get this awful stop-start thing? Is it protocol to put your hand up, or what's your suggestion for the best way of being noticed so that your question is listened to?
Yes, so I think putting your hand up, if it's a small enough meeting, once meetings get above a certain size, your image becomes so small that you start to get lost. Zoom and most other these media have a hand up facility, so that on the actual Zoom you can put your hand up and sort of get attention. But like any sort of meeting that gets over a certain size, you kind of need a chair who's looking, someone who's chairing the meeting and looking to help out with things like that. If you don't have that, then I think that there is a case of saying that you want to speak, pausing and then speaking, so that there is a stiltedness to it, but it's just getting into that dynamic and that groove for the meeting.
Yeah, that's useful, thank you. Yes, I think the pause is a good idea. I hadn't really used that reactions button down before, so that is, that's good. Thank you for that. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a question, please?
Of course.
It's quite related to what Ginny said, in the fact that if somebody's already speaking, how do you politely butt in? Do you raise your electronic hand? Do you wave in the air? Or do you talk over them? How do you best sort of interrupt somebody politely in a forum like this?
Thank you for the question. I think there's different ways of doing it, and I think it depends on the dynamic of the group that you're talking in. If it's particularly formal Zoom or situation, then I think things like the raising hand facility and waiting to speak would probably be appropriate. But I think in most Zooms where it's a little bit more relaxed and there's more sort of ebb and flow to the conversation, the sort of trick of making a noise, as in you go, and if you're on speaker view, suddenly you flash up, or the yellow box comes over to you and people realise that you want to speak, and then if it's a polite forum and person, they'll go, "Oh, sorry, Diane, you had something to say," and if they're not, then you need to make another couple of noises to butt in. But I think that sort of signalling that you want to speak is an appropriate and good way of doing it. But sometimes you don't have to be too polite, because otherwise you won't get your point across.
Thanks, Ian. Has anyone else got any questions?
Oh, hello. I've got a quick question. Thank you.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Ian. Yes, thanks. I love the way that you're sort of utilising the theatre and acting sort of background here. I just wanted to ask you if you actually encourage people to use acting skills sometimes in their performance, in their delivery, and if you do, can you give me an example or two of how you do that, in what circumstance? You know, actually using, you know, teaching them acting skills, because that there is an element of that, isn't there, when you're trying to really come across quite powerfully in certain situations?
Yes. So there's many schools of acting training. So there's lots of ways that actors get trained, and lots of teachers who teach in slightly different ways. And by that I mean some schools of training are very much about the internal process of acting. I don't know if you've heard of method acting. Method acting, and it was very popular and famous in the 50s, 60s and 70s in America, but it sort of spread all over the world. Robert De Niro's a method actor. Daniel Day-Lewis is a method actor. And what they do is they put themselves into the psychology of that person that they're playing, and they go so far to live their life. So Robert De Niro would go and live in the jungle in Vietnam to understand what it's like to live in the jungle, and then he could be it and project it more realistically. But it's very intellectual. And then there's a different way of working, which is very physical, which is about controlling the message you're sending with your behavior to be convincing with your audience, and understanding that if I make the shape of a certain character, that will have a relationship to how I feel, and I'll change how I feel. Does that make sense? It's kind of a long-winded sort of performance argument. But I come from a background that's very physical, that's about understanding the message I'm sending with my body, and if I'm doing it, then I'll change how I feel internally. And that has a real clear application and use for people in performance, in any job, in any situation. Because in every interaction that you're having with an audience, and that can be one person face-to-face, one person or a number of people over Zoom, or standing up to present in front of a room full of people, in all of those situations, if you can be more aware and more in control of your own behavior, you can send the message you want to that audience, and you can get them to see you as you want to be seen, but you can also make yourself feel how you want to feel. And that's at the heart of what our training is about. Saying, are you in any situations where you don't feel as confident and comfortable as you want to, or you start to have imposter syndrome and you don't feel like you should be there, or you don't feel like you're getting your point across, or are you in any situations where you're not having the results that you want or the effect that you want, and people aren't seeing you as you want to be seen? We can help you. We can help you be more aware of your behavior and make those small and subtle adjustments, so you can come across in a certain way, no matter the pressure, and you can start to feel a certain way, no matter the situation or the audience or the pressure. So yes, the answer is yes, because I've been doing it for 12 years in all sorts of situations to all sorts of people. But that's the kind of way that I do it in the context. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that gives us an outline of what you mean.
Have you got any?
Thank you.
Yeah, did you want any? Is there anything else that I can explain, or does that answer it enough?
It's fine for now. Yeah, it's kind of a general answer. I just wondered if you had any more specific examples, really, where you've actually you know encouraged somebody to almost become an actor at that moment to deliver a very powerful scenario in that.
Yeah, there's an interesting line. Everyone I work with goes, I'm really interested in what you do, but I don't want to act. I don't want to go into my job and be an actor. I want to be myself, but I just want to be a brilliant version of myself. And
so that means they've got to act a bit there.
Exactly.
They're actually saying it. Yeah.
The amount of people that I work with who one-on-one are really convincing and amiable and confident, but then the minute they step into an environment that they don't like, maybe it's presenting, or maybe it's managing the team, or maybe it's speaking to clients, or maybe it's just talking to this particular person, they go to pieces and they don't come across in the same way at all. And they look all shy and they break eye contact and their voice wobbles, whereas it totally didn't in a situation where they were comfortable. Now, they're presenting themselves in a really bad way. So it's not about changing who they are. It's about getting the best version of themselves that they do all the time in a comfortable situation, and learning how to do that in a difficult situation.
Yes.
And by
that's what I'm meaning. And yeah, that's what I was looking for, really. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Leslie. If we haven't got any other urgent questions, I'd quite like to just jump into doing a little bit of networking, if that's okay with everybody. Yeah. So I'm going to hand over to Georgia. And
sorry, Alison, I think Karen Grant had her hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I didn't see that. Karen?
You have to wait.
Sorry, Karen. Hi.
Hello, thank you so much for putting today on, and for the input. It's really helpful to understand. My question was, well, two things really. I find myself in meetings nodding along quite a lot, like I would do in person. Is that okay? Is that okay because it's showing engagement, and to what extent do you do that? And then the other thing is, I often have to take a lot of minutes in meetings, and so my eye might naturally be down. So is it just a case of maybe looking up at regular intervals to show that you're still engaged? What would your advice be?
Yes, so great questions, thank you. So on the first question, I think that it's a really positive thing to do, to nod along. To such an extent that I actively make myself do it, even if I'm not feeling it, because I know that what it does for the person who's speaking is starts to unconsciously give them license to keep talking. It's a signal of going, I'm with you, I get you, I'm interested. So I think it's a great thing to do. I think it really helps the dynamic of the Zoom. And as for the minutes, yeah, I just think you need to, unless you can cultivate a way of writing and not looking at what you're writing, I think that you have to move between the two. I'm sure that the people that you're in the meeting with are aware, and therefore accepting and understanding of the fact that you're not making eye contact when you're writing, and it's just a case of you then, whenever you can, looking up to keep that connection with the meeting.
Brilliant, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so anyone else quickly? Can't see anyone with a hand up or whatever. No. Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to hand over to Georgia, who's going to just quickly explain how the networking element will work.
Hello, everyone.